This is season 7, episode 15, number 280 of the Decoded podcast. Chris, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. Good on-ramp.
Yes, very good on ramp. I would use the word therapeutic for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Free therapy. Thanks, Chris.
The doctor is in. Goes both ways. Yeah, it goes both ways. For anyone interested, it was a short dive back into are you still learning as a teacher? Are you still growing? Are you still feeling like this work, this career is benefiting you? I think it's a good question to ask. And I think the third path that is created, it's not there's more than one path, but it's not necessarily a yes, no. I think maybe the alternate is, what if it isn't? So you go from a yes, no to what if it isn't? And does that mean you double down and try and find deeper interest, more? Do you ask for a different portion, more from the education system? Do you change portfolios? Do you take on a headship? Do you get another AQ? And then there's kind of where I'm at, where I'm like, I think I just want to work to leave this ride altogether. And in some ways, like tapering out of this job is where my mind's at. How do I taper out? I don't need, where I started my rant in the on ramp was I am trying to move from thinking to action. So I'm in that space, actively taking steps to understand and set out an alternate story for myself, so that when I leave work on that last day, there's a smoothness to it. That's it. I get handed my keys and kind of off I go. I'm not fanfaring myself. I'm definitely, at this point, I'm not showing up for any retirement party. I'm just getting in the car and kind of going off to my poetry reading or going home to walk the dog.
Or going home because a bunch of people are coming to your neck of the woods for a
Could
food
be.
event or something.
Yeah,
You know
could be. Foodapalooza 22, whatever it is at that point. But I want a smoothness to it. And I know for me, like, I don't often do things smoothly. I don't do planning at a time very well. It's really clumsy living in the moment kind of stuff. I'm fortunate that my job right now creates a hell of a lot of stability in my life. And I think that's given me pause to think about, okay, so will my life fall apart without the rigor of my, 9 to 4, 9 to 5, whatever the time frame, the AM to PM time frame. A couple years back, we had a conversation around, I know, like, my dad did not do well when he left working for the bank. Without that, his purpose was entirely wrapped around getting up in the morning, getting on the GO train, getting into work, and then all the checklisty stuff that told him where he had to be and who he had to be and what he had to get done. It was so externalized that when he retired, he did things that were of interest to him, but it also, like, he lost some vigor. Maybe that was artificial vigor. He tried reinventing himself away from banking. I'm not looking to reinvent. I'm just looking to start growing something different that just kind of takes over when school is no longer in the way. And so in doing that, I'm just looking at how I invest, how I contribute, what I willingly give up in order to, without being asked. Maybe that's the question. the stuff that I give up before I'm even asked to give up, and then looking at the cost for that. And right now, the best litmus for that is time away from my family. Time away from my family. That's my best right now, because I figured that's the alternative universe that takes up a lot of my time, which I'm good with. And doing things for my family, doing things for the people in my house. So yeah, that was the on ramp, and that was good. Like you said, the therapy part I think was not necessarily getting to an answer, but to recognize that there's some different questions I need to start asking in the next few years.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. For me, the therapeutic part was just to be able to express myself in a space of non-judgment, um, just an open space to be able to talk with someone about things, because people don't walk around doing that generally, even though it's good for them. But you got to create your spaces. You got to know who you're talking to. There are layers there to that.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, Rochelle. Rochelle says, Chris, you could become a playwright and act in your own productions.
I could.
He could.
I could. And I think and I appreciate that. Thank you. There's, I think, a part of the gymnastics, the mental gymnastics that I go through is to kind of go from, like, I don't want, so, one of the conversations around retirement is everyone looking forward to having that free time, like having that sort of, they don't, maybe not call it free time. So one version is I need retirement because I just need to not be here anymore. Like, it's the waking up on a Friday mindset, right? You're not really protecting the weekend. You're not enjoying the elements of your life that include work in the general sense. So it's easy to say, to sort of pick the work as the bad guy. Work is the thing that's keeping me from being happy, because I only feel happy when I get the weekend. Some of the work that I've done over the last couple of years, I'd say the last 5 years, is understanding that there are elements of protecting the weekend that mean, like, you have to do the work to make sure that you're having fun along the way. And the more often you put yourself at the crossroads of, is this challenging? Is this event, this thing, this activity challenging my belief system about work? I would have avoided that conversation in the past. I'm allowing that to happen more now. So the reverse of that would be, oh, I just stay 5-10 minutes longer to photocopy some extra stuff so that it's ready for the morning. Maybe not necessary, but it's convenient to have it ready. Get one more extra day prep. And in doing so, you're not there when your kids come home from school. Because these are the 10-minute opportunities, right? Just these 10-minute little windows of decision making that are nice but not necessary. I'm really looking closely at those things. I'm starting to look closely at those things and say to myself, those 10 minutes have value in a way that in the past I would have ignored. Because I think to myself, this is the teacher mindset. This is what's necessary to do school well. Take a day off, leave your prep plans behind, feel all the stress that entails, come back the next day and realize, like, nothing happened out of the ordinary. And you realize how we constantly can invest in like almost antagonistic thinking that on one hand tells us, like, all the work we have to do to take a day off. But I think one of the gifts that I've realized is that when you do take that day off, not very much bad stuff happens. The whole system kind of goes on without you. Like you're actually the beast is okay. They were okay without you there. Um, and that the perception that you're the one is so subjective. It actually has, just to sort of take that day away and kind of do a thing. And I'm not talking about being irresponsible here and not doing your job. I understand duty. I understand the rules and regulations. I'm saying it's just those 10-minute decisions. I'm starting with those. Or at the end of the day where I'm in the zone and I'm just like, okay, and I sit there for a second, but there's nothing happening there. I'm not recovering. I'm not thinking. I'm not reflecting. I'm just kind of like, stunned. Like, I should have done that in the car. Right? Like, I'm not in pain. I'm not confused. I'm not anything. I'm just like taking that moment. Well, there was no value to that if taking that moment means I could have been doing it on the car on the way home. Like, that's a good little efficiency to look at. So, if I circle back to Rochelle's comment about the playwright, my question is, how could I start doing that now? How do I access that now?
And you and I
Why
talked.
why why am I not accessing that now?
You and I talked on the on ramp about the things that we want to do outside of our work day, and that I like what you're saying about the efficiencies. Like maybe there are things you can do in the car on the way home, in the car on the way to work. Um, there are ways to find efficiencies, but there are some things that cannot be done in 10 to 15 minutes multitasking. And when you hit those barriers, that's when I think for me I start to reflect on, okay, what is the most important thing here? You spend your whole day working, and then sometimes there are things after school that you're invited to. For me, I've always enjoyed being on committees and doing that extracurricular work because I've always wanted to do just more than be in the classroom. But these days, I've said no in the last couple of years. I've said no in the last couple of years that have equaled out to be more saying no than ever before in my 21-year career in the last couple of years. And people are looking at me funny because they're like, but you've always, yeah, I I have in the past always wanted to do these things and speak up with certain groups to build something else outside of the room. But there's a cost to that time that I don't want to invest anymore. I don't want to invest. I want to come home and be with my kids or being able, like, there was a committee meeting that occurred a couple of weeks before the Christmas break. And I remember that week well because there was a lot going on personally. Both of my kids needed to be at certain places at certain times. On one particular day, they both needed to be in a place at around the same time. And my wife wasn't available. So I took it upon myself to make it I don't want to call it a problem, but it was my problem. I made it my issue. How am I going to do this? What's happening at that time of the day? And one of the answers, one of the things that was happening at that time of day was there was a committee meeting. And I could have had it on. I could have used my cell phone in the car as I was driving from one place to another. And I thought, I'm not going to do that today. Because as I take one kid to one place and then take the other kid to the other place, and realizing that it was just all action, I needed to build some I needed to build some quality into those actions and not just quantity. What I mean by that is I didn't want to be just mechanically transporting people as my head is in a meeting around AI or whatever the case was. I wanted to be present with them as I was doing the transport. And it was simple. I just said, I'm not going to be at the meeting. And then I think, holy cow, like this is a voluntary thing. I choose to spend my time there. But on this day, I wasn't going to spend any time there, and it didn't matter to me that I wasn't going to be there. I would not have operated this way 10 years ago. And if it was a day where I didn't have to take anybody anywhere, I would have been at the meeting face to face. I wouldn't even have considered the the option of doing it virtually. And I'm glad that there's a virtual option because, as you know, I've walked away from many face to face opportunities because I'm wondering, why do we have to do this face to face and suck up this valuable time? Well, what I consider valuable after work hours. Why do we have to do that? Um, why are you forcing me to make this hard commitment? Why can't you be a little bit looser so I can still participate and still be home to prep for dinner or be present as something's happening in the home that maybe can't occur if I'm not in the home, right? Like there's a lot of layers, and there's a lot of me looking for people to speak bluntly about them, but they won't because it's inappropriate to do so. So it's better left unsaid. It's better left for people to make assumptions rather than to know exactly what the purpose of this operation is. So there's a lot going on in my head around these things. But I guess at the end of the day, if I'm forced to make a decision, I will. And on that one day, my decision was that I was not going to be present for an extracurricular activity. I was going to be present for my kids, which, it sounds great when I say it here to you and to our listeners, but I've not always been that way. I've not always been thinking of my family first. And so there's layers of that too. So for people to think, oh, Roland's a good dad. No, don't think that. I'm not saying that for that purpose. I'm just saying I've had an awakening of sorts. And that awakening is connected more to the family than it is to my profession. And there are seasons to our lives, right? Before I had kids, I was very involved with many things. It was all about work, actually. And now it's not all about work because there are other things I'd like to pursue. There is, even if I'm not literally sitting with both of my kids after school on a Thursday, having quality conversations, there's the multitasking of things that have to happen at home. So other things, I'm putting in the work in certain places to relieve work in other places, right? You talk about efficiencies. Finish work, at home, dinner, laundry, this, that, and the other thing to ensure that the next day there's a chunk of time where I'm doing something that doesn't involve multitasking. But if I don't do the multitasking, there's always going to be these things kind of sitting there waiting to be done, waiting to be dealt with. Yesterday, great example. I was literally busy, and I don't mean busy, badge of honor busy. I mean busy like there was a list of things that needed to get done around this house that I took responsibility for. I woke up, I exercised, and then it was a day of, okay, I'm getting to that now. Okay, I'm getting to that now. To the point where my wife said to me at one point, she goes, what are you doing? Like you're literally, I just see you go up the stairs, come down the stairs, go into this room, go into that room. And, I said to her, there's a ton of stuff that I'd like to do around the house that need to be done. And today's the day. And she's like, what do you mean? Like, why is today the day? And I'm like, because this is the day. There's nothing happening. I don't need to be anywhere, right? In this chunk of huge time. But all these things, I want them to be done so that tomorrow morning when I wake up and I'm chatting with Chris, it's not living there like you've got all these things that need to be done. They've been taken care of. I'm putting in the work today. I'm giving it the hours today so that tomorrow I don't have to. And it was just this, okay, I'm like, do you need something? And she's like, no, no, I'm good. Because today is the day that I'm going to be helping my wife with things that she would like some assistance with, right? Um, no matter what, you gotta put in the time, you gotta put in the work somewhere. And I would rather do it um, kind of, I'd rather do it on my terms than somebody else's terms. And I've told you this, when I get into a mode like that, I say to my family, I'm don't call for me. I'm not coming. My head is here. This is where my head is. There was nothing else on the schedule for my head to belong to. So this is where my head's going right now. And when I do that, because I don't do that as often as probably I should, they get it. They're like, okay, he's not available. Don't call him. And I like that space where I'm able to express and communicate. Because there are times where I'll get on something, but I won't tell anybody. And in the pattern to me is it seems to cause conflict. Because then I get all hot and bothered. Like, hey, leave me alone. I'm trying to do something. And they look at me like, well, we didn't know you were doing that. Like, we're just living our life. So I'm like, let's alleviate that. If this is the pattern I see, then for me, the brief solution is to just tell everybody, this is what's happening at this time with me. Does this work for all of you? And if they're like, yeah, we're good, then I'm gone. Come to me if you need me. I'm not coming out of this realm until I'm satisfied with my result or I get done what I want to get done. I'm not. And that's a huge that's a huge positive in my world that I can do that. That I can just boom, this is happening and I'm not going anywhere until it's done. It can be a very big disadvantage to the people around me and to other things that need to happen if I'm always like that and never giving of time. As you and I have been discovering, work is not, we view it a little bit differently now than maybe we did years ago. There are other more important things, I guess, for me in my world than just the work that I get paid to do every day. I do
Yeah.
like my job, but I'm not my job. I used to be, and I could have been, but I'm not right now.
I hope this is a long-term relationship that that I'm in with Rochelle, because I think Rochelle mentioned, did Rochelle mention young kids at home? Did Rochelle mention that? Was that somebody else that chimed in? I
Today?
forget.
Or
Not
just,
today.
no, she's
Not
talked
today,
about
but
young kids at home.
yeah. So that's there's a little time travel there, right? Because I think, did Rochelle mention something about kids going into kindergarten? Like there's some
One of her kids
transitional
is
thing.
going into kindergarten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that there's I like being in this long game conversation with someone that's in a totally different stage of education than me. And I may have been teaching as long as me. I don't know. But I just mean, if I anchor it to where I am with my kids, both of my kids, one's about to go into high school, the other one's in high school. So you can sort of measure your own growth by other people's growth. So, I look at where my kids are at and the steps that I'm taking to stay apace with them, very differently than I did um, when my kids were going into kindergarten, right? So I look forward to when I say the long-term relationship, meeting up with Rochelle at some point, we're in some, and they get to mention like, yeah, I remember when you were talking about that reframing of looking at work, and is work still, is work making you better? Like, where, and there's a lot of different, there's a lot of good, the question that I'm asking right now, and I recognize the privilege of being able to even ask this question, if work is making me better. For some people, that's the question never occurs, because work just has to be a means to getting things paid for. It has to be, and that's the, I get it, that for some people that's how they perceive it, and sometimes it's that for me as well. Um, but if I dig a little bit deeper and say how satisfying, if it were only a means to pay the bills, for me, I would find that completely dissatisfying. Especially if it was a means to pay the bills and it was still taking up the amount of space that it does right now in my life. If it's a means to pay the bills, but I'm developing a second life that it's fueling, like other things I'm interested in, that sounds more tolerable to me. The third layer of it is, how do I set myself up such that when this is no longer paying the bills, something else that is, a passion for me, something of interest. Rochelle said, writing plays, could be that. It could be that. I understand on one level. I like the comment, but I also get I understand a little bit about the process of that, and the publishing and the writing and getting that all kind of produced. So you say that kind of offhandedly, but with intention, Rochelle, and I appreciate it. Where it lands with me is like, logistically, I can't put that, the way my work is working, my family is working right now. I can't put that burden of developing that particular element right now, because there's the time it takes to kind of do that. It doesn't. There's no spare hours, so to speak. So I'm back in that same spot of two things. Looking forward to having a conversation somewhere down the road with Rochelle, and what, it's not retirement. Retirement seems so final. But when the question around is, I actually don't even know what the question is, because the question for me is just, am I willingly giving freely of my own resources to education in a way that I'm not receiving one-to-one back? If I give an extra 15 minutes to get a thing done, am I getting 15 minutes of my own time back somewhere else? And that 15 minutes that I get back, can I put something valuable in there? So again, I went back to that example of staying after the school to do photocopying for 10 or 15 minutes is taking away from what I would value more, which is being home with my kids and hanging out. Then there's no gain there. That's not a valuable gain. I would rather have to wait the next day in line for the photocopier, but have spent that time with my kids. So
I want to get to a couple of the comments that Rochelle and Gary have made, and then I want to share a story uh, aimed at Rochelle for her to remember, if it means anything to her, about moving forward with her child entering into kindergarten. So Gary said, it's important to be cognizant of where you're spending your time and energy and where you want to be. Um, Rochelle said, well said, Gary. And then Rochelle said that, yes, her daughter has changed her perspective on work. So when we were working in pandemic times, and a lot of all our meetings were happening virtually, I remember being in a meeting, and there was an individual in this meeting that, you know, it was my opinion, it still is, that this individual is constantly seeking to grow their career at any expense. So kind of like a desperate attempts to advance, which for me is different than, anyway, I don't mean to layer my things, but it's part of my perspective. So this person's in the meeting, and they're talking, and I think they were invited to speak at a particular meeting. And at one point, and it was all like it was like a Google Meet, but you could see them. And at one point, this person's child, because they're at home, enters onto the screen, and you could tell very young, like pre-kindergarten. And this person, the way that they spoke to their child for kind of being close to them and interfering while they were trying to work, it it upset me to hear the way that they were talking to their child. So at that moment in time, it wasn't let's use the name Jimmy. It wasn't, "Oh, Jimmy, mom is on a call. Can you just go back to your Lego for a couple of minutes, and when I'm done talking, I'll come over and see what's going on." It was The child was scolded. Um, and I guess I made judgments. I was like, this meeting we're doing is not more important than your kid. Nothing we're doing is more important than your kid. And you're smoking your kid because they, instead of staying with their Lego, they jumped on screen to see what you were doing and see who you're talking to. I'm like, I was thinking, you're so desperate to be praised and included, and I've got this list, right? You're so desperate to have all these things happen that you're literally like shunning your kid at this moment in time. It was such like a wake up to me. It was just it did shift. Now that I think about it, it shifted the way I operate with my family when I'm doing something like this now. Even though my kids are much older, they know when this door's closed, I'm podcasting or I'm meeting with someone. But they also know that if they need to open the door and tell me something or get my attention, I know that if they're going to do that, they're not doing it. They're Whatever's happening is they're worth whatever's happening is worth whatever issue I'm going to have with them opening that door. And so knowing that, I think that I need to tone it down, because if that door opens, there's something happening in their world that they believe needs my attention, or they need me. Okay, I get it. They respect this door 99.9% of the time being closed. So if they're going to open it, they don't need to be scolded. Rochelle, don't be that parent. Just don't. It's not worth it. I don't care. I don't care if you become a consultant, a principal, superintendent, director of education. I don't care. You're always going to have your kids. You're not always going to have this work. It's just not worth it to me anymore. It was at one point. It's not anymore. It's not worth it. But it's all about perspective. It's what you're exposed to, the experiences you go through. I just remember that. And every time I see this person, because I do see them from time to time in my work, I remember that time. And I feel like, oh my God, you sold your kid out for what? For what? Because as I'm staring at this person, I try to recall the people in my past 21 years in this school board who have done that job. I can't remember who they were. So I'm like, what are you doing this for? Because it's not like you're going to be some all-star that we're going to remember for the rest of eternity in this school board. Because I don't remember the last two people that did your job. And I've been in the position where I was happy. I was happy to let go of my family to do this job. But the universe said, no, no, no. It's not going to work out that way for you right now. Don't be that person. Now, be who you want to be. I just that I'll never forget it. I can see it. I remember the way that that person was talking to the kid, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, really? Now, maybe this person was stressed out for a number of different, who knows? Sometimes we talk to our children in ways that are not appropriate. I am the champ of that. I can say that. I'm nowhere near perfect as a parent, and I've said things to my kids that even my wife looks at me. She's like, "Are you serious?" Yeah, I am. So when I saw that, I felt humanity, and I felt, "Oh my God, this job is not worth that. It's not." So that's what I say to you, Rochelle, as your kid continues to grow, goes into school, is going to get in your face when you're doing your report cards or whatever. And then what happens if you don't finish something for work? Like, what's going to happen? We place expectations on ourselves that help us get things done. I get that. But there are just some things that aren't worth it. I didn't know that 10 years ago, or I didn't view things that way. That's how I view them now. It's not worth it.
Way back, so in my second year of teaching, easily my second year of teaching, um, Jamie Fornazar, so she's an educator in the system. She's still a teacher in my board. Um, when I came in, I worked with her for a year, and then partway through the second year that I was working with her, we were both in the same family studies department. Um, she went on a pat leave, and then I forget how the timing worked out, but she came back after a year, and then I kind of changed to a different department, but then came back to the department. So this is before I had children of my own. And she said, coming back, she said, you know, starting her family has made teaching easier. And I think at the time, I mean, I didn't know what to do with that. I just thought, oh, cool, there's a way to make this job easy. And it didn't make me think, okay, well, like I got to start a family. But it kind of fascinated me. It fascinated me. Um, and I think that what she was telling me, the wisdom, and it's unfortunate that it's taken 20 years for this to kind of sink in. But I think the wisdom is in what you're saying right now, is that it offers you the opportunity to glimpse outside of this really intense silo, which we call education. And it forcibly, many times, reminds you that the kids in your classroom aren't actually your family. They're not. And I think the third part to it is that the gift is, and it's funny how often school will do this, and we maybe are not tuning into it, is the reminder that there's a cost when you put your classroom ahead of your family. You can say that for any job at all. But in this particular case, I don't know what level Rochelle teaches at, but I was fortunate that I was teaching in secondary because it almost felt like, oh, like I didn't have a sense of, there was like this idea that because like it really did feel different. I would go home, I had very, very, very young kids, and I would go to school and I work with older kids. So I didn't have a synchronicity there where I was watching the development of young kids at the same time I was watching the development of my kids. And measuring the, you know, some of that teacher judginess when you're in the classroom and you're like, oh, yeah, well, you know, Jimmy's like that because, you know, one of Jimmy's parents is out of work right now. Like I didn't have a sense of how incidences and elements in when kids are young could impact when they were older. There was just too much distance there. I think if I were working with young kids, I would have been in that constant mode of looking at what I'm doing with my family at home and wondering what was happening with their family at home. So it's almost like by working with high school students, I always told myself, you got time. You got time. Don't worry. You're on the right track. You're a good dad. You're a good worker. Like you're fine. And I think there was some blindness in that. Like I wasn't really taking the note from what was being presented to me. So I think, again, to go back to, you know, Michelle, having kids coming into education, or any adult that's having to care for kids, their own children. Um, where I'm at now is really looking at um, the zero sum, that time spent at work directly equals not time somewhere else. Or you've said it, yes to one is no to another. There's no magic. And the part of it that I've gotten better at is like, no, I'm not staying up till 1:30 in the morning to do prep. I'm not. I'm just going to make that decision, like what you said, like what's the worst that's going to happen if I don't do this, right? I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to reduce the prep that I'm willing to do. And I'm going to see what that actually results in. Like, I think I need that data. I want that data.
Well, as we talk about this, it reminds me of some of the best times where both of my worlds have collided, work and home. And one of them I'm reminded of when my students on a weekend um, were invited to the church to experience one of their sacraments, reconciliation. So a relatively low key experience in the church. I remember for whatever reason, it was like a Saturday afternoon. Um, for whatever reason, I brought my oldest with me, who was around the same age as the kids that I was teaching. And it was perfect because I remember saying to my principal, um, I'm going to be there, but I'm bringing my son. I have to bring my son with me. Kind of like, well, if you say no, then I won't be there, right? But he was never going to. He was a great principal. He was never going to do that. And I remember bringing my son with me and saying to my son, "Okay, this is where you're going to sit." And I brought some stuff with him that could keep him occupied if he wasn't interested in observing and listening. But I said, "You're going to sit here, and Dad's going to be. I'm going to be floating around the church. I'm going to come check on you every now and again." Um, and he was totally cool with it. He said, "Okay." Like it was easy for him, and the kids were like, "Oh, you did bring your son." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And my son's over there, but this is your special day, so let's focus. They were like, "Oh my God, Mr. C's son's here," and I'm like, "Oh my God, let's focus on what you're doing here." The worlds collided. Did something? I heard a big, like a thump over there, Chris. Everything okay?
The dog, I don't know. The dog. You hear that, eh? You okay? What
Yeah.
happened?
I'm like, Hazel's over there. She just fell off a chair or something. I don't know what she's up to, but
She might need to go out.
and I'm not even surprised that she did that. She strikes me as the comedy relief in your house.
She does provide comedy relief. She has done that a couple times where she's sort of snoozing. And I
Oh,
think I've mentioned to you that she likes to sleep against things. I don't know if I told you that, but like she likes to have her back up against your feet or like against the couch. Or
um,
actually, I'm going to put her out in the backyard.
okay, cool. So anyway, I recall times where I've had to have the worlds collide, and it was good. It worked out nicely, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
regret it. And I'm telling you right now, if a principal had said, like, here's the other thing I've seen at parent-teacher interviews where I've gone into other classrooms to check in on my teaching buddies, I've seen their kids in a corner playing with Legos or whatever because there was nobody to watch their kids at home and they had to be at school. I have no problem with that. I think that's fantastic that your children can come in and have a snack in the back corner of your classroom as you're doing parent-teacher interviews. I think that this humanity, it demonstrates humanity, it demonstrates priority, it demonstrates professionalism in a weird kind of way that, hey, I'm here to do my job, but guess what? My job's happening at a weird time and my kids have nowhere to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible for my kids. One comment, I'm going to get to the comments in a second, but Rochelle mentions AQ courses. As an AQ instructor, I've received a handful of emails from the candidates in the courses that I've instructed and facilitated saying to me, "You know what, this is happening at home with my kids. They're sick or they have to experience something that's taking up a lot of parental time, and they'll say to me, can I have extra time for X assignment or whatever? And I'm like, yeah. Like I love that I have this perspective of being a parent and caring about my kids. And I say to the candidates who share these things with me, I'm like, yeah, do what you need to do. Thanks for letting me know. I'll expect your assignment when you tell me that you're going to give it to me now because of what you're doing in the next couple of days with your kids. Okay. Like the only requirement I say to them is that you get it to me before this date, because on this date I must report to the university what your mark is. And that I don't control that. That's what they want from me. That's what they're going to get. So as long as you can meet that, and if you can't meet that requirement, then I'll refer you to the next person up who has some say in how that works. It's not me. But I have for many years seen the beauty of bringing the two together. Now, as it could become toxic. Like, imagine you come to work and you say to your boss, my kid's got nowhere to go. So as I teach all day, they're going to be in the back of my classroom. That's where for me the lines start to be like, whoa, like, you're at work. Anyway, that's for me in my little brain, that becomes, there's something there that doesn't sit well with me. I mean, if it's an emergency, it's an emergency, but there's something there. But like after work hours, if you have to be in a room doing something, why can't your kids be around? I don't see why that's an issue. Unless they're causing an issue. Then we got an issue.
I was going to say until it
Right.
actually is, right?
Until it is, it's not. So, sorry, I'm just going to share.
Yeah, do it. As you bring it up, that whole thing about the
Spit it out.
thinking, just the preemptive thinking. That's all I'm just saying. That whole idea of like, is it actually as bad as you are perceiving it to be? Is it actually an issue, or is it just something that we do to prevent humanity from existing, humanness from existing?
Gary says that he thinks that having a new perspective on your career can contribute to professional growth. Family has been a great asset to his growth.
I think as long as you're asking yourself that question, and I think you need to ask yourself that question all along the path. I can only use my own experience as evidence, direct evidence. That's what stopped me. That's what stopped me in the PQP path, because I asked myself that question at every single step of the way. It wasn't a let's see how this course ends. It wasn't let's see how what gets up on the our human resources job list, on the career list. It wasn't it wasn't just that. Let's say it wasn't colleagues saying, oh, you know what, it would be cool if you were an administrator. It had to become, is this next step in alignment with where I am right now? Because it became critical that point be clear for me, because I had met enough people that where they're at right now, they're trying to manifest clarity, but they can't go back and root exactly how clarity got them to that point. There's some regrets. There's some like, yeah, this wasn't for me, but no, I'm here. So I'm going to do the best job that I can. So I just, all this kind of into the mix, that's what became me saying, no, you know what? I'm not going to finish PQP2. So I never did the project. Sorry, I finished PQP2. I'm not going to do the project. I'm done. I'm off. I'm done doing this work for something I don't believe in anymore. Not the leadership part, just giving it away for free for somebody else.
We could do a whole podcast on that.
Dude, we've spent a lot of time unpacking that one. Maybe someday I'll teach an AQ or PQP about not doing PQP. How you can sort of present leadership in different spaces.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Way more powerful than thinking you can do it on the head of a pin, right?
Right. Yeah. Rochelle says that she's done some AQ courses in professional reading based on her daughter's needs.
Mm-hmm. Wear the hats. We talked about this last week. That type of learning will actually help support your parent side when you go in and you're talking to your kid's school, and you get to decide, am I going to be a parent now? Am I going to be a professional now? Am I both? Because I have access to both. You keep that veil nice and thin, and you decide what toolkit you use.
Yeah, and Rochelle said it's helped her in her classroom as well.
Great.
You and I what I love about our friendship is on several occasions you've messaged me asking me questions about elementary school process procedure. I've talked to you about high school process and procedure
Mhm.
to gain some understanding before we make that call to the school and say, hold on a second, right? Um, the other day when I was at my in-laws' house celebrating Christmas, I went on a tirade. It was like 5 minutes, and it was a master class in special education because my wife mentioned something about one of our kids, um, and something that the teacher brought up. And then I went into teacher mode and said, if this is the issue that you're observing and reporting to me, where is where is the mound of work that comes with that? Right? It was like I wasn't being a jerk. I wasn't being vindictive. I was like, well, if you're telling me this, then that means that behind what you just said is going to be a mountain of you following process and procedure because that's what I want to see next. And it was funny because my sister-in-law looked at me like she knew that the answer was going to be, uh-oh, they didn't do all. And my sister-in-law is a teacher as well, and my in-laws were teachers as well. So we got five teachers sitting there. I'm going off on a master class of this is what the teacher said. So then naturally I said, well, what about X, Y, and Z? And my sister-in-law is looking at me like, oh shoot, they didn't do X, Y, and Z, did they? And I'm like, well, they didn't come out and say that they didn't do it, but everybody in the room knew that they didn't because of the way that they were navigating. So then I backed off and said, I'm going to talk to you in a couple of weeks and I'm expecting to hear about X, Y, Z because you don't talk like this about a kid without doing the work that you have to do that comes with that kind of talk. When I'm very anal about stuff like that, I do not present things to parents unless I've entered into a process of working through this. But that's my style. That's my way. The learning I've done and the leadership I've engaged in, I'm now starting to see it's coming. The fruits of my labor are like appearing in front of me on the tree. I can eat that apple now because I did the work to plant the seed and to develop that tree. And at the time, I was growing that tree for different reasons. And now I'm like, doesn't matter what the reasons are, I've gained a lot from that process. And it's not, like you said, it's not doing the work on the head of a pin. It's being generalized and used wherever I need to use it. So when somebody spits out the word leadership, I laugh because I'm using the skills that I've learned, my understanding about leadership anywhere and everywhere. I'll be at the hockey rink on the ice with the kids and I'm not even the head coach. And I'll go over to the coach and I'll say, hey, I'm going to go talk to this kid about this. He's like, go do it. Because he's like, I know how you operate. You're not going over there to cause a problem. You're going over there because as a teacher, as a leader, you see something that you can help somebody improve upon. Um, or you're going to give them a tidbit that's going to help them develop. Like on a selfish note, the kids were doing a drill and I saw my son do it and he was off. So I went over to him and I said, listen, I'm not here to talk to you about your work ethic or your effort right now. I see it's there, but your execution of this drill is off. And I think it's off because I know you well. And I think you're thinking this, this, and this. Stop thinking. And then the next two drills you do, this is what I want to see from you. And, he kind of looks at me like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. I'm your dad, but I'm also on the ice observing. And I also have years of experience understanding how people learn and how people lead. Like it all came together. And then he went and did it, and it was better than the 50 times he did it before. I'm like, just keep your focus on that because you got all the other pieces of the puzzle. It's this and this that is throwing you off. Just because I've learned about educational leadership doesn't mean I can't flex that in the world around me if it's going to benefit people. So, Rochelle, I say keep going down that path. The last comment that Rochelle made was that her parents did that all the time. She was often at school events that happened on the weekend, like First Communions. The students were always happy to see me. Yeah, I remember bringing my youngest to the last school I worked at to their Christmas event, and I wanted to be there and I felt I needed to be there, but he was with me that night. And so I brought him, and it was awesome because he participated in the activities and he got to meet kids and talk with kids who were in my class. And it was a good time because I was there representing teacher, Roland the teacher, Roland part of the school community, Roland wanting to be there with and for the school community. But I also had my son with me, and it was important for him to see where I work, what I do, but he was loving every minute of it. So these things work out well when we are open to them. Chris, I know that you have to punch out. We are going to end this soon. So let's give you the final word and then we can shut this down for today.
Thanks, man. I like Ben had said this around the house too, just around, the new year, new you kind of thing doesn't really work. But at least for me, it doesn't work for me. So I haven't been able to make it work like somehow that, the new year brings the automaticity that somehow you can access new thinking. So I like, I mentioned in the on ramp talking about Ryan Holiday's perspective at looking at systems and kind of looking at specific systems that I'm looking at right now are it's a real preoccupation is like, how am I feeding into the education system such that like I'm still getting something out of it. So that I guess is more of a 2024 challenge as opposed to anything specific because everyone's path on that will be different. So
Is that you and I in the hourglass? I love the way you draw me with the beard. I think it's hilarious. I can hear somebody's making coffee over there, and it's
yeah,
making me
yep,
think it's time for number 2 for me.
yeah.
So I'm gonna write it down.
The fam is starting to circle around. So
I love that. I
Karen,
love that.
yeah,
Sorry.
Karen's in dosing up the coffee, and the dog is like all awake now. So it's that morning energy. The morning energy is starting to pop into Saturday.
Which is, I gotta say, we weren't experiencing that. We weren't living that through you when you were in the basement because you were in the basement and the world was happening above you. But now part of your duties involve you taking care of the dog. And here we are where you're in your kitchen. I'm still living in my office, but it could change on a dime. Well, actually, it changes when my son's at a hockey tournament and I'm in a hotel room and we're trying to do this, right? So you do what you got to do. And I'm glad that you are understanding of my situations when I need to operate differently. So thanks for that. I appreciate that.
I think that question, that reprioritizing how we do the pod, was a early prototype in thinking about how I do my job, because we really, both of us were in very much locked in thinking mode with our 2 previous iterations of our own podcasts. We've talked about the rigor, the editing, the grind, all the sort of steps, the setting up, the scheduling, the logistics, the creative part of it on the other side, trying to, get a little bit of music in there, do, all the setting the levels, all that stuff that happened away from living. Um, this pod was never going to be that. It was going to be integrated into kind of living lives. And if you do that, then that means you end up in this space here where it's like, yeah, got to put the dog out in the backyard for a second, or oh crap, the dog peed on the floor. Like it's that just happens in real time. So
Well, I get it. I'm cool with it.
yeah,
When we started this thing, the idea was, oh, there she is. She's just chilling now.
yeah, kind of plunked
The
down beside me.
I remember it clearly. Chris, do you want to do a podcast where we get together on Saturday mornings and we do our thing and we just forget everything else? Let's just do our thing and we'll do it as it works. And you were like,
Mm-hmm.
let's do this. And literally, what, 6.5 seasons later, here we are. We're still doing it. You're in your kitchen. I've been in the hotel room. Like we do it.
Dude, seven and a half seasons.
Oh, aren't we in season 7?
We're in 7.
Oh, sorry. 7.5.
No, wait.
No, 6.5 because we haven't finished 7. We're in 7.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, that's how it started with, I want to still podcast. Do you want to podcast? Do you want to do it that's different than how everybody else is doing? Because at the time, and still people, the creative, the music, the bumpers, the this, the that, the shiny stuff. And I'm like, I can't do shiny anymore. That's why I had to stop the other one. Do you want to do something less shiny? And in that less shine, we have found a new shine. We have found a shine that works for us. So thank you for that. We good to go?
We're good.
Awesome. This was season. Well, thanks to everybody who listened in. We appreciate it. You can check us out most Saturday mornings. If we're not on, it's because one of us has to do dad duties or we're both on dad duties and can't make it happen. Life.
Yeah, life.
This was season 7, episode 15, number 280 of the Decoded Podcast. Peace.
Ciao, man.